Hello, and welcome to the Libri Labra Book Club. I am joined today by my husband, John, aka BookTube Hubby, and Book Club VIP member, Tom. And before I jump into things, really quick, if you ever want to join us in our discussions on camera, you can do that by becoming a Patreon on patreon.com/LibriLabra. And there are a few different perks for doing that. You get priority replies in YouTube videos and some behind the scenes stuff. You get to help us decide what it is we're going to read each month. And there's an exclusive Facebook chat where we talk about the media that we've been consuming. And so if you're interested, that's what you can do.
Join us. Come talk.
Join us, yes. For January, we read Interview with the Vampire because we recently lost Anne Rice. It's a book that I have read previously, and I really wanted to revisit it. I also learned that they're making a TV show out of it. So I was hoping. I feel like you may have read it, but I don't remember. Do you remember reading it?
A long time. Like they're saying, I read it in my childhood.
Oh,
yes.
no, I don't know about your childhood. When we first started dating.
No,
Okay.
no. Because honestly, I went into this knowing I could use a reread because I don't remember too much about it, but I knew nothing apparently. But yeah, I read it in junior high or something.
Okay. So, we will talk a little bit about it in regards to our initial thoughts after reading it, and then we will jump into spoiler territory. I already kind of explained why it was something that I chose. Tom, what were your initial thoughts?
I know it wasn't in my wheelhouse, but I was interested to read it just as, because I know when the movie and the book were out back when it was published, it was a big deal. So it was like, well, now I get to see what people were talking about. Aside from when all the hype and everything that was around both of those things. So, but in a way though, I was sad because when you're not reading it in the zeitgeist, it's a different experience.
Yeah,
everybody else is reading the book.
That's true. Things mean different things now.
Yeah. What absolutely blew my mind was the copy of the book that I have, which I was reading it, and it says the 20th anniversary edition, and I bought this in 2000 or earlier. So the fact that I've had this for that long and it was already a 20th anniversary edition, I had no idea that the book had actually come out that long ago. I had no idea that it's been around for that long. So even when the movie came out, the book had already been out for forever.
Sure.
What were after reading it, your initial thoughts? Just kind of
after
basic, yes.
I'm ready to watch the movie.
Are you?
But I don't know. I just knew growing up that I remember watching the movie because I think it was one of my mom's favorite films for some reason. I don't know, but I just never. I guess apparently had never watched it through to completion because I don't remember half the things in the story. But I don't know where I was going with that, so we'll move on.
I feel like I had such a unique experience because I knew absolutely nothing about it. My cousin had read the book, and she invited me over to watch a couple of movies. I believe we watched this and we watched Frankenstein. They were both things that she had read that she wanted to see the adaptations of. And so when I watched the movie, I was like, wow, it just kind of blew my mind. And, it had actors that I recognized. And so I just absolutely loved it. And it was after that I watched the movie that I wanted to then read the book. And so I read the book and then I rewatched the movie. And it was very interesting how the movie that I was enthralled with all of a sudden seemed like, not that I didn't still enjoy it because I did, but after reading the book, it almost seemed like an awkward dramatization of the book, which is not something I recognized watching it the first time. But
Hollywood does.
But it was so weird that I watched it without acknowledging that. And then after reading the book and then seeing it, I was like, whoa, it just kind of changed the experience of the movie so much. So I'm kind of glad that I watched it first, and I guess we'll see what happens when we rewatch it, if it has that same feel. But one of the things that I was kind of battling with was because I watched the movie first, Louis will forever be Brad Pitt in my mind.
I get it.
And when the audiobook did not have Brad Pitt's voice, I was very, very disappointed. And it was so hard for me to like accept him in the audiobook. But what did you think of the audiobook performance, Tom? Because I don't know how long ago it was. Like probably before. It only had like 6 chapters, so I assume it's before like audiobooks became popular. Like more, it was like more of a books on tape kind of thing.
No, that would explain it, I guess, because I was expecting. Well, the book itself isn't really put into chapters. It's like, well, I will figure it'll end here, and so what the hell, why not? No, it's like breaks in the story that it follows. So if you're looking for chapters, sorry, you're SOL. But no, I thought the narrator was good. Yeah.
So I think it's kind of interesting because there's a frame story happening, right? Where like the book starts with the vampire approaching a reporter and being like, you got enough tape? I got a story to tell you. And so basically Louis just like telling the entire story, and it's kind of like a first person recounting of everything that happened. And I normally like absolutely love first person stories, and I'm so used to being in my own head and hearing my own thoughts that like I feel at home for somebody else. But Louis was just so tormented by by everything. I feel like
I would have said emo. Like, oh my god, that's all this book is. It's him navel gazing, you know.
And while the first time I read it, it felt very, very poetic. This time around, it just kind of felt a little whiny. But I still feel like I enjoyed the story, and I love how he does his best to hold on to his humanity throughout the whole thing. I mean, like, as best as he can, anyway. What did you think about Lestat as a character?
Me?
Yes. I feel like I had weird feelings about him.
I didn't put too much thought into this previously, but I feel like it just seems like he was a stark opposite to what Louis was supposed to be. So you could have the contrast, and you got the different sides of, I guess, specific perspectives.
I feel like there was kind of a lot that I disliked about Lestat, because like you say, he is kind of the opposite of Louis, like, just being like, ignore your human emotions and like do what you got to do. And but there's still like lots of points in the book where I like genuinely felt bad for him. And I guess there was a part of me, at least, that just wanted him to be able to redeem himself from being somebody that they wanted to get away from. Tom, do you have any?
When I was reading it, I kind of figured that Louis was the ego and Lestat was the id. Like Lestat was like impulsive and I'm going to do this, and it's like you're going to do that. It's like, whereas Louis, of course, spends most of the book self-evaluating, and that's exactly what the ego does. So I think they're two sides of the same person. If you put them together, they would form a complete vampire. But well, no, because throughout the book, they make the point that Louis is sensitive to all like art and everything else, whereas Lestat is like the brute. He gets shit done, So I think he's a good foil, and is a good contrast to Louis. Is he the quote unquote vampire nature they talk about but never actually show in the book?
I mean,
what is vampire nature? That's what it is. Well, show us. Don't just talk about it. Just show us. What does that mean? Does that mean you can leap higher, or like? Because the inference was, the less humanity you have, the more you can use your vampire powers. But ironically, what was his name? the guy in Paris. He ran the
Armand.
Armand. That's what attracted Armand to him, is that was his humanity. And when he became like a full vampire, that's when the things fell apart, between them. So, humanity apparently is a really good thing to have. And eternity is a freaking long time not to have it.
Right.
Pretty much. It reminded me of the story is like these guys were going to make a radio series. Yeah, we're going to do 24/7 Led Zeppelin. And they found like Led Zeppelin had like 10 hours of material. So they could play. It's like, well, what are you going to do with the other, This is exactly what they're doing. So, who was it? Julian Barnes wrote a story. And I wish I could. It's in the history of the world of 9.5 weeks, and what like heaven would be like, what actually heaven would be like, and not to spoil it, but to give you an idea, it's like, oh, I get up, have the perfect breakfast, I'm go to golf and 18, hole in one, all the holes, and do that every day. It's the same idea. Like I said, eternity is a long time. So,
I think one of the things that I had completely forgotten about the story is how they approach Claudia.
yes.
Because I think in the movie, she was a little girl, so I think they do a bit more to kind of detach them, where in the book it felt like there was a bit more romance between them, which I imagine, at any point I would imagine that would be like super controversial to include that.
Right.
I would say that was uncomfortable reading, because they don't quite make that leap, but they
right.
like
Yeah, but it was definitely there, and and I guess the way it's explained is just that even though she's in like a young person's body, she's already lived however many years,
so she
has the experience of.
To that though. This is what bothers me throughout the novel. I know it's a small thing, but still. Number one, interesting choice, and to make her this young, like a 5-year-old, and talking about, oh, my lover and this, I'm sure it was just controversial. But the thing is, like, well, if she's maturing, right, but her body's not aging, how is she maturing? Does that imply, a spiritual side that's maturing that is not part of her body? Because her body is clearly the same as it was when she died. So I'm not sure what the metaphysics are, involved with that. That's what bothered me.
And I'm sure that's a very good question.
I guess in my mind, the definition of maturing, if your body is not doing anything different, is just that life experience is what
learning wisdom.
Is what allows you to mature.
Yes, but that implies the body can change. So if that part of the body can change, why not the rest? And I'm not grilling you. I'm just saying.
Oh, so you're saying, interesting posit. Interesting.
Yeah. It's an interesting choice that she decided to make her 5, number one. And, Claudia herself says, well, you could have waited. And, but they didn't. So.
I don't remember exactly. I feel like it was just a Lestat's manipulation that he decided to take her, because I think Louis had left her there to die. And, he was just
surprise! Remember her?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, and he was like, "Now we have a daughter."
Yeah, you wanted one, right? No. So.
But it was good to hear that was like, a vampire sin, that you don't ever change humans that are that young. Obviously, for the issues that come up and how. Right.
I thought it was an interesting choice, but like I said, that just bothered me throughout the book. So, and then going back to Louis, if you you've watched The Flash before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, especially the first season, it's not so much now, but I'm the fastest man alive. Well, except for Reverse Flash, except for Godspeed, except for Savitar, it's like, where does he rank in this hierarchy of vampires? Not very high, apparently. So,
it's kind of funny, because I've always remembered that Kristen Dunst was Claudia in an Interview with the Vampire, and I looked her up the other day to just be like, what does she look like now? And it was obviously a stark difference because she's grown a lot. But
she's actually a woman now, I suppose.
Yeah. But it's just interesting that was like one of her first roles, and I'm
Mhm.
still kind of surprised by who they picked for that movie. And I think I read somewhere recently that Anne was like not happy about their casting originally.
Hmm.
It just seemed like a surprising mix of characters. Like I have a hard time imagining Tom Cruise accepting like a role like that now. But I feel like they all kind of worked.
Yeah, reading the cast list, just no, I haven't seen the movie, but it's like, oh, they had Tandy Newton in there too, and overall, it's like, oh wow, well done.
I think it was at that point she wanted to pick specific people who to fit those character roles, and they wanted the big names.
Yeah,
and those two were just good enough to fit in
to
there.
satisfy everybody. Yeah,
Right.
But
I mean, like, I feel like I've watched or read a bunch of vampire stuff, and then, you know, just baby vampires in the sense of like newly created vampires are always so difficult to manage. So I can't even imagine trying to manage a 5-year-old vampire,
a toddler vampire
has like very little willpower and constraint and whatever else. Like,
highly emotional.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't like
tantrums,
blow up their spot all over the place. Like, but I don't think I realized until I read an article today that Louis and Lestat were, I guess, like a couple.
You didn't get that
like
out of that?
Not really. Like maybe a little bit to feel like something was going on, but not really like a solid.
I really think that she posited the idea that turning somebody into a vampire was the most intimate thing that you could do.
I don't disagree with that. I think yeah, I guess. But I guess I didn't think about Louis and Lestat really together until I had to like stop and think about, like him and Armand. Because that just seemed a bit clearer. Maybe because Louis seemed to be more into it or like cared about him more, whereas Lestat, like,
he seemed so aggressive and blunt that he just it was always repulsed.
Yeah. So from what we know of being a vampire, would either of you ever want to become one if it were like a thing?
I'm going to say no for the reasons that I outlined before. Well, that's what they say in the book. That's the way most vampires die, is they just get bored as shit and they kill themselves.
I would want the time to learn all the things, but I don't want to get that bored.
Right. Well, that's the life. You can't help it, unfortunately.
Right. So I mean, maybe for a little while, but not for eternity.
What about you, Desirai?
Eternity is a long time.
No sparkling, by the way. Just so you know.
What?
No sparkling.
Oh.
I feel like maybe if I had someone that I was going to spend eternity with, that I was happy about spending eternity with, I might be willing. But it would have to be at like a reasonable age. You know, like I wouldn't.
24.
Yeah, maybe like whatever prime age is. Like I wouldn't want to be stuck as an 80-year-old woman for eternity, obviously. But
a badass 80-year-old woman.
Yeah, but you know, you still have the perceptions of people and stuff to deal with. But it would be nice to be super fast, super strong, like kind of superhuman. And
I mean, that whole idea is great. Everybody wants that.
But I feel like I would also probably be like a Louis.
Trying to hold on to you. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that mixes very well, and I would be probably feeding off of rats because I wouldn't want to hurt anybody or kill anyone.
Probably wouldn't want to eat the rats.
Yeah, probably wouldn't want to eat
That's
rats.
another
either.
thing in the book. Now that you mentioned that they're drinking wine, but they don't eat food. How does that work?
Were they drinking wine? I thought
Yes.
they were putting blood in wine glasses.
No, maybe when they said wine, they meant blood, but I took it literally. So
that's funny. I don't know. I might be mixing vampire lore because I know I've read like in certain places where vampires can drink, but they don't get drunk, or if they drink, it doesn't last very long because their body like expels it really quickly, or
Not alive.
Like in Twilight they didn't need to eat, but they could eat just to kind of fake it, just to blend in, kind of a thing. So I don't know if it was like a blending in at the pub.
We're definitely late to this conversation. Someone's probably like pulled this all apart through Anne Rice's books already, whether or not they can and can't eat, or what the wine was all about.
And
maybe we missed something.
I mean, yeah, you can go biblical and say, "Oh, well, that's
it's a
body and blood of Christ sort of thing." Well, you can't have that either. So, But what was I going to say? Actually, what you were talking about with again reminded me of the Flash. There's an episode where they actually make a brew which, because of Flash's enhanced metabolism, they made a brew that would get him drunk. And it was one of the better episodes in the series. So cheers to Grant Gustin.
That sounds familiar, so I feel like I watched that episode. I still haven't finished that or The Arrow.
But well, this is for a topic for another time, but there's like 750 episodes in the Arrowverse. If you watch them all, that's a lot. Anyway,
that is a lot.
I was gonna say, I also think it was, speaking of vampire tropes, how she I don't know how controversial they were at the time when she did it. Like, oh, ha 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 ha, you think I'm followed by crosses? I'm not. Or what about the mirror? No, I can see in the mirror, sort of thing. So I don't know how different that was, but that was like, oh, that's interesting. So
I shared an interview on Goodreads with her that I thought was really, really interesting because they started asking her about other people's vampires, and she was very knowledgeable about them and was like, "Oh, I like this one because," Well, I mean, because like Stephanie Meyer had said that she didn't want to find out about anybody's vampire. She didn't want to look into it or do the research because she wanted her vampire to be unique, which is why he sparkles.
And that's what she came up with. Excellent.
That was her reasoning.
This is what happens when you don't do your research. Now I'm not one to talk because the number of vampire books I've read is 2. This one and Dracula, the OG. So
but in the interview, I don't remember off the top of my head now, but she did say, she mentions whose vampire she likes more, or they asked her like, whose vampire do you think is better? And she just kind of like smiled and nodded her head, and he was like, oh, I know what that means. But
that's like asking, is your child better than that other person's child? It's like, well, what are you gonna say?
I've seen like all over the internet though that like Lestat was her baby, like, and like he comes up in other books, and the next book is about him, and I have not read that, so I don't know what happens or whatever.
Well, she developed the whole series of books. Like there's still like 17 books in the series, isn't it?
Something like that. I think more like 13 or 14 or whatever. There might be.
Still, it's
a lot.
It's significant.
But it just makes me really curious if like Louis appears any place else, because to me, he was so much of this book, but the way she talks about it is that no, Lestat was.
Louis was there to tell the story of Lestat.
I like Louis as a character.
Even meant to.
And that's why, Lestat is one of the board ones, because, that's why he wants all this opulence, because it gives him something new to look at, and something cool and interesting to look at. rather than dull shinings. And thankfully, Anne Rice makes Louis rich enough that he can afford that crap. So,
what do you think was Louis's like purpose and intention with telling this story to the reporter?
That's
Like,
a good
I don't
question.
like what was he trying to accomplish? What do you think?
What he was trying to accomplish by telling the story.
You think he just needed to get it off his chest? You think he just wanted to
He was bored.
leave? You think he was bored? He was a bored vampire.
He wanted to tell somebody about his life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was nearing the end of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least he thought so.
When you've been living as off the grid as he was, you want somebody to acknowledge him. Yeah,
somebody to write his memoirs. That's all.
Yeah.
So do you think the reporter had the reaction that he was expecting?
No.
He the vampire or he the reporter?
He the reporter.
Oh. I don't know. Looking back on it, if you're writing a memoir, that kind of says to me you're imagining a time when you won't be around, but people will have the book to remember you by. So maybe he was going into that great, vampire cemetery in the sky or whatever. Who knows? Or who knows? Maybe he lives on for 17 more books. I haven't read the series. So.
Well, I mean, but the reporter at the end is like, instead of being like, wow, like all these terrible things happened and what a tortured life you live, he was like, make me a vampire.
Well, it's one of those things that sounds too good to be true, and it likely probably is. It's cool for like the first X number of years, but then it's okay. Now what?
What did you think about their sleeping situations?
Talking about the coffin?
There was, as far as I remember, there were 3 coffins, but they didn't sleep in the 3 coffins.
I thought there were 2 for a while.
I think in the beginning,
and that's how they started Claudia and Louis sleeping together.
Yeah, I think in the beginning that was the case, but they eventually got her own coffin, and he said
and then she used it.
Yeah, because she said she would sleep with him. But I don't know. I just always felt so bad that Claudia was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm tired of him. I'm tired of his nonsense. I'm tired of his not telling us enough.
Mm-hmm.
And Louis doesn't ever stop her. He doesn't intervene. They basically just commit like a crime against vampires.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Which you could argue in hindsight.
Well, I mean, did they really have to know it was a crime against vampires? Like, if he's still holding on to his humanity, he should know it's not good to kill somebody else.
I mean, he's been killing humans for a while now.
Yeah, but he's the tool of the stronger characters, Claudia and Lestat, always. I don't know the way he is at the end of the book, but all through the book, he's dominated by Armand, Claudia, and Lestat. So, because he doesn't stop her.
Yeah, no, he doesn't stop her at all. I don't think he knew what was happening.
But if I were Claudia, I'd say, well, he's not dead. He's right there.
I kind of don't know if I fully understand what happened to him in the end, because he was like all decrepit and
he was feeding off just rats.
Right, but why?
But again, if their bodies don't change, why is he decrepit? He wasn't decrepit, so maybe that's answered in a later book, or is it because of what he suffered at the hands of Claudia? Who knows?
I mean, I think they were trying to establish that like the more blood they have in their system, the more alive and full they look.
Oh, that's true. Okay, that makes sense.
But I just, like, from what I remember, when Louis went back to see him, like after everything that had happened, he had somebody living with him. Like, he had a young vampire or something. So he must have turned another vampire. So why was he a hot mess, not feeding and...
Well, the other vampire was helping him stay alive for some reason. But it's very interesting to that, because as soon as Louis showed up and said, "Hey, and Lestat's like, "Oh my God, you came back to me," and then the other vampire just walked off. So it was knowing that this vampire basically knew that he was basically that Lestat had been waiting for Louis this whole time. So basically, when Louis showed up, that vampire's broken heart wandered off, and I'm pretty sure we hear more about him later.
I guess that's possible.
Well, I know he has a book named after him.
Does he?
The Vampire Lestat.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, John was talking about the young vampire.
Yeah, that he turned
at the end.
After,
I know. Yeah.
After Louis going missing.
Oh, we may get his version of that, like what led up to that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm not that interested to read it, but
I had started it at one point, but I was sad and disappointed because it picks up somewhere in modern times.
Oh.
And I loved the romanticism of like the time period and kind of the setting.
That was one of the good points in the book where I think it was, I can't remember which vampire it was, where they talk about one of the reasons they kill themselves is because time just passed them by and become irrelevant. Like everything they knew was gone. Like when he goes back to New Orleans, it's like, well, this used to be here, but it's, it still is kind of, but it's now this sort of thing. So you lose your frame of reference as you get older. And some vampires can't handle it, much like people.
I mean, I would imagine. Even just going back home to New York and seeing my old neighborhood and all the new stores that pop up, the ones that are gone, it's sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember being upset because I was like, I don't want to see these vampires in modern times.
They probably don't want to either, but here we are,
They took the second book and the fourth book, I think, and they combined them to make the second movie.
How?
The Queen of the Damned. I actually had that soundtrack.
I guess that means you like the movie.
I don't I mean, I guess.
I like the music anyway.
Yeah, the music was awesome.
Movie said, no, I'm kidding.
So now, what did you think of the Vampire Theater and their whole little troupe in Paris in regards to their performances and stuff?
What do you mean, the performances? They're there to play, right? They're actors.
Yeah, but they used to like feed on humans
during the
performance.
Yeah. They thought it was all part of the play.
Yeah. Talk about hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
We're gonna call it Theater of the Vampires. Nobody will find it. Armand.
It was a brilliant title, wasn't it?
Exactly. Cast the Vampire. I was like, that's Theater of the Vampires.
So around that time when they do go to the theater, I almost called her Chloe. Claudia basically begs Louis to give her, I don't remember her name. I don't know if it was Madeline.
Margaret? Was it? Madeline?
Madeline?
I think it's Madeline.
Yeah, Madeline. Okay. Because she knew when she walked in the door, or as soon as she saw Armand, that she lost Louis. So she asked for someone else to take care of her.
Yeah, but Claudia had also that resentment against, well, Lestat and Louis for making her a vampire that young. Yeah.
Right.
So
She wanted a mom or caretaker.
yeah,
She didn't have a mom.
yeah, because she couldn't do things on her own, even though she was, quote unquote mature. But
But she needs a chaperone.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then, if I remember correctly, the woman used to make dolls because she had lost.
Yes.
So that was why she was part of the reason why she was picked, and part of her character development was. I liked that. I did like that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, she had her own little immortal doll.
Mm-hmm. This child won't leave her, sort of a thing.
I think it's kind of wild, though, that they spend all this time kind of trying to live in the shadows, and then they kill Lestat, they leave, they go and they find, finally, right, because they've been searching the world for other vampires, and they finally find other people like them, and then everything goes to shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they walk in, and then Louis setting shit on fire, and like, I know Santiago had issues, but if you're searching the world for people like you, that seems like
you're begging for that kind of trouble.
Not the best approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think Santiago, like, who was the character in Twilight that seemed like he was based on Santiago?
Mm-hmm.
The one that as soon as he sniffed, he was obsessed and he had to have her. No.
Oh,
yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
So the idea was that Louis looked at him wrong, and he was just forever obsessed with trying to be one, do something to Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then I guess that just goes to show, like, it just enhances, like, your worst impulses, I would think.
That.
Which is unfortunate, because then you're never, ever better. You're just a worse, more powerful version of yourself as a vampire.
Well, so you can follow your desires that way to a point. Except when the sun's out, but yeah. But the thing I found kind of remarkable was, except when the slaves caught on to what they were, there's no word of anybody investigating any of these murders. None. Especially in Paris, when you had upwards of 10, 12 people. That implies 10 to 12 people dying a night. With the teeth marks and everything. It's like, you think somebody would say, hey, there's a connection, but nothing.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing with the bodies. That's highly suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Now, granted, they were playing on the populace that nobody cared about, but still, you'd think that somebody would notice that, hey, look, these marks. Oh, here's one on this one too, and on that one, But it's also possible they could have infiltrated, Paris society to the point where they got things covered up too. So, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, because it seemed like they had humans in there, just being used as food. Yeah. So either they were like being mentally manipulated, or they were like willing participants.
Because those exist too.
Mm-hmm. There's always cults that form around these things that they think is a good idea. So,
and like you said, the whole
you can feed off me every time you like. Just make me a vampire when you're done.
Oh my god, the whole that whole process was very intimate and erotic. So I'm sure even not becoming vampires, it was still very erotic for humans. So they just kind of hung around and turned the other way when crazy stuff was going down. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to say that process physically seemed to be, taking out the human blood till there was just enough to keep them just barely alive so they could suck the vampire blood into themselves. So
That's how the Vampire Diaries does it, right?
Yeah,
so
that's how a lot of vampires do it. It seems like what makes a vampire, right?
Mhm.
But Lestat was very clear that you have to stop before their heart stops beating.
yeah. Otherwise, too late.
Was that explained?
I mean, it
I mean,
makes
like-
sense that they would, if they die, they die. That you can't.
Yeah,
you
but
can't
I mean,
just
you
fill
could
them
drink
with
a
vampire
juice
blood and
box.
bring them back.
Well, obviously, if they die. But he made it sound like you should never feed on them.
When their heart stops.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it would
I do
hurt.
remember
It
that,
would hurt like the vampire,
Mhm.
and I'm just wondering
There's
what
no
that
life
was
left.
about.
There's nothing to feed from.
Yeah, but again, like if you're drinking a juice box, you could get all the juice out of it, and then I'm wondering why she decided to write that in,
Maybe
because like the blood would just be gone, right? So you just dump the body and
It seems more like a life essence thing than blood.
Mhm.
okay.
I mean, you can make the point that, well, if they die, that taints the blood, and that's what causes them to be sick. So, I would think that the quality, like to John's point, life essence gets so low that it becomes tainted somehow, and then that's what it actually does the reverse of what it was intended to. So,
Okay. I was also trying to figure out like what Claudia did to the little boy that she offered up. And she had given the little boy absinthe and laudanum.
laudanum, yeah.
And so, like, I don't, Lestat being a vampire and other things not affecting him, I don't understand why that was enough for them to be like, okay, he's dead now.
I don't know.
So you think Claudia was just
Hope. I hope this kills him.
Oh my god. Or like we were suggesting, like kind of like the Vampire Diaries, where they're just making him weak and tired enough
Emaciated to
where he can't get his own food.
Correct. That seems like what it actually what it is.
Mhm.
Like they don't really actually fade away and die unless you burn them.
I don't think the book ever states like how long they could survive without feeding. Do you remember that coming up?
No, but they came up with the entire idea of how Lestat got out of the swamp, and they talked about all of that and what how much time and excruciating it might have been for him for take however long it did for that to happen.
Mhm.
Pretty sure there's a lot more info in the other books.
I'm sure. Do you have a favorite character in the story?
Me?
Yeah.
Claudia.
Why is that?
Because it just seemed like she was given the biggest character. Whether she played an integral role in everybody's story, but it was just I think the story was really about her tragic life, not Lestat's.
How about you, Tom?
I'm not sure if favorite, but one of the, I don't know, satisfying characters was Armand, in the sense that we're going through the book where Lestat, I know all this stuff. He doesn't actually tell them, but Armand actually does, and he doesn't lie about it. So it's like, okay, then we get an idea of what it means to be a vampire from him, not from Lestat.
Right. There's a lot of maturity and wisdom in there too.
Because he was like, I think they suggested he was the oldest,
Yes.
right? He was the oldest vampire.
That they were aware of.
But apparently he also was with Lestat. He was Lestat's ex.
He turned Lestat.
Right.
And yours, Desiree?
I would say Louis, and I'm sad that I think he doesn't come up in the other books. I don't think he does, but Armand definitely has his own book, so that's probably interesting to hear about him or how that happens or what Armand does with his life.
The other interesting part I thought was when they go to Eastern Europe and they go to Transylvania and then they find, oh yeah, there's a vampire, but it's a revenant, not necessarily the vampires that that they know. So good on that for that red herring, so to speak. But no, it's just interesting to see how it's interesting to see the rules of engagement for the vampire tropes. It's like how does the book use them and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things when we get to this month's book coming, that's one of the interesting things I find about it. But let's discuss them for a later time. So.
Well, I guess we kind of know how it ends for Claudia, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice to see her like be happy and just be able to live with Madeline or whatever. I still kind of think the whole thing with Louis showing up with Claudia and Armand like immediately knowing and trying to break them apart was kind of strange, I guess.
Why? Because Armand's seeing right off the bat that a child vampire should not exist, and he's like, "Oh, this hurt Louis so bad." Yeah, so he was just like he did what he could to try and keep Louis from being hurt as much as he could.
Well, I mean, like with Claudia being so young, although still somewhat experienced, like, are you not surprised that she also immediately knew that that's what Armand was going to do? That she, because she says as soon as she saw Armand, she knew that he wanted Louis. When it didn't seem like Louis knew that. It didn't seem like Louis was aware of that right away.
Louis doesn't seem to be that aware of everything, to be honest. Like he's telling the story, but it doesn't seem like he's telling it from a knowing perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like Louis still learning all of this as he's going along too. So him telling the story to the reporter, he's still telling the story about of a young Louis who didn't know shit. Oh, excuse me, sorry. So, that's part of the character development.
Did you find the ending to be satisfying? And if not, like, what would have been a satisfying ending?
I don't know how I can say it's satisfying or not. It is what it is. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So whether or not I was happy with it? Is that what you're?
I won't say it because, like, I may just be crossing my wires in regards to what happens at the end of the movie versus what happens at the end of the book. But I just thought it was going to go differently. We'll just leave it at that, I guess. But
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, with the idea of vampirism at all, period, I mean, how do you expect it to go?
I thought the end of the Vampire Diaries was good.
Oh, dude, completely
you
different.
You could still
worlds.
have happy vampire endings.
I'm not sure that it could have ended in any other way, though, because the interview had to come to an end at some point. So
that's true.
It was like, I'm done, mic drop, walk out, done.
That wouldn't be satisfying.
Pretty much. No, but that's more realistic, though.
Right.
It's like, are we done here? Yeah. Takes off the mic and just walks away.
Oh my god! If they closed the movie out like that, so many people would have been so pissed. Just imagine so we're done? Okay.
Yeah.
Both of them just walk off?
Yeah.
Just leave the camera sitting there? I think I would do that just for funny.
Well, I think we can probably do final thoughts.
I'll go first.
Okay.
For looking back and to see where a lot of some of the vampire stories have taken inspiration, I did enjoy reading Anne Rice's Vampire Diaries. Interview with a Vampire.
Mhm.
You guys talked about Vampire Diaries too much.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go with 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't crazy awesome.
I listened to it mostly this time, and I'm pretty sure I originally gave it 5 stars. And only because I know that I don't connect with the material when I listen to it as much as I do when I like read it visually, I think I'm going to keep my 5-star rating.
Okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was good, but it wasn't like, oh my god, mainly because it was such a slog to get through Louis' self-introspection section. Like, oh yes, we heard this before.
Again, Louis.
Again, yeah. It's the kind of thing where I think the book could have been shorter, but I couldn't tell you what could be cut. But then again, I feel that way about the Outlander series too. It's like, yeah, you don't need 1,000 pages, but I couldn't tell you what that needs cutting. So,
Right. Yeah, I saw that your review on Goodreads said something like,
what did it say here?
Liked the destination but didn't enjoy the journey. Something.
Yes,
along those
I
lines.
did. Yes, I did like where they ended up, but not the journey. Yes, exactly right. It's like, oh my god, how many more pages? Oh my god, But there you go.
All right. So, Interview with the Vampire, we got a 3, a 4, and a 5.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to watch the movie?
I don't think I'm sufficiently interested. No, I'm serious. It's just, I'm sure the actors and everybody do a fine job, but the story is, if it's much like the book, the story isn't compelling to me. Especially if they're going to have Louis with these freaking, oh, should I do this? And oh, I'm so guilty. And it's like, well, which I get up to a point, but oh my god, this is just a little too much for me.
I feel like there's probably less of it because, he definitely narrates some areas, but they're not going to put all of his mental stuff on screen. So I feel like you get to see him living life and doing things more than just listening to the thoughts in his head. But
well, that sounds better, but still, again, I'm not. I mean, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have watched it before I read the book, so reading the book hasn't changed that at all. So,
how about you?
Makes sense. I'll watch the movie.
We'll watch it again. Okay.
I mean, every movie I watch is researched, so I accept.
All right. So for February, we are reading Akata by Nnedi Okorafor. Did I say that? I hope I pronounced her name properly. We have seen her at YALLFest before, so we got to see her speak about her books and stuff, so that's pretty cool. I have a few of them. I haven't picked up any, so I'm glad we're finally going to be reading one and then discussing it.
I think the last book in the latest book in the trilogy just dropped, so that's one of the reasons why I chose her.
Okay.
So that is what we'll be reading for February. I hope that you'll join us reading the Akata Witch. And once again, if you want to join us on camera during our live discussions, you can do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Libri Labra. So if you made it this far, thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.